So no dig food growing. Anyone else want to give it?
When before something like we put the onion, onion grow up. When I put before onion, I dig the soil. When I put the onion, take off onion. After I don't dig, I put in broad beans.
Okay, so some kind of companion planting or rotation.
Yeah, rotation.
So again, food growing.
Permanent agriculture.
Yeah, so its history is in looking at permanent agriculture, how to grow food in a way that utilizes perennial food, so it's continuously
like a circle.
Yeah, continuously grows, and there's reason as to why that is, but its history was first of all to look at how to look at how there was a paper called The Limits to Growth, which basically looked at how how populations were growing and how economics, population growth, and resources all interface with each other. And what they realised, the reason why, if we look at the human growth pattern, it was like over millions of years, very, very, very slow, and then all of a sudden, it did this. And so exponentially grew. And the reason for that, they concluded, was there was one particular resource that when humans worked out how to utilise this resource, it facilitated communities to be able to really grow, so cities to become bigger and bigger food production. Any idea what that resource might be?
Growing, farming.
No, agriculture was slightly separate, and there's other patterns that go with agriculture.
Fertilizers?
It's used as a fertilizer.
Oh, nitrogen.
I think you told me this before.
Not nitrogen, not again. It's
our
used to
phosphorus. Our country, our back to home. My grandpa have a cow and goat. We can use the compost like that one fertilizer.
Yep. So it's not that. It's petroleum, oil.
Oh, that's right.
So oil allowed people the clever utilization of taking this 100 million year old trees and organic matter that decompose with pressure and heat, and a particular bacteria that no longer even exists on this planet anymore. 100 million years of all that pressure creating this magical substance, oil. So it's ancient sunlight that has been converted into a power source. And so the clever ways in which we have been able to utilize that energy to grow food, to make fertilizers, to build buildings, etc., to transportation. If we think about all the things that we use petroleum for, helped us for our societies to grow. But what they realized is this is a finite resource. There's only a certain amount that the earth has ever made, and there's only a certain amount of big deposits of it, and at some point those big deposits will run out, and at some point there will only be small deposits, and to actually extract those are going to be really costly to the earth, into the environment, as well as financially costly. And so they realized that really we need to think of how we create societies that are not reliant on fossil fuels. So that stimulated people to start thinking, well, how do we do different things, including two people who started to look at how do we grow food without utilizing fossil fuels. And as a result of their work, they came up with all the best practices from around the world. All the best practices around the world, all the indigenous practices that people were doing in different parts of the world for how to grow food, and repackage that, and that's what they call permaculture. So its origins are how to grow food without the use of fossil fuels. But as people continue to really think about this, they've started to realise, wow, you know, the design process, because what they decided to do, how they packaged it, was by looking at how does nature work? How has nature found patterns over millions of years to create richness and abundance, and, you know, to find systems that somehow balance themselves out and allow themselves to really thrive? How do we take those patterns to make the designs for food growing? So that was the first part. But patterns were so clear, it was so useful, that why should we just restrict ourselves just to growing food? So let's apply this to making buildings, to making, you know, transportation, and so it's now grown to meet all of our human needs, whether it's our mental, emotional, spiritual needs, whether it's, you know, say food, energy, buildings, you know, clothing. It can be applied to anything. So while its origins are permanent agriculture, it's now more considered to be just a permanent culture. So a culture that allows us, that beautiful prayer says, how do we live in this world in a way that really allows us to really understand how precious nature is, to take care of nature so that nature takes care of us. So this is permaculture. And saying we can use the design principles and the ethics, you know, and I guess one of the most important things about permaculture is it's all underpinned by ethics. You know, is it good for the earth? Is it good for people? Does it have longevity? Does it allow the system to continuously thrive? And you'll notice I try to avoid using the word sustainable. For several reasons. First of all, it's been greenwashed. You know, British Petroleum, Shell Oil, they're all sustainable, really. But also, the word itself is inherently weak, and it's not good enough for what we need right now. So if you play a little bit with the words, you know, so if someone was to ask, you know, how's your marriage, and the answer is it's sustainable, how does that sound? You know, it's like just barely doing enough to just about stay married, you know, and it's not that little shock, boom, the system falls apart. So sustainable in itself is not good enough. In a world where, you know, things are getting so desperately out of sync, to just try and sustain something at a level that is already weak while it's depreciating itself doesn't make any sense. We need regenerative systems. We need a culture of regeneration, of richness and abundance, and so away from this scarcity model, and actually recognizing that actually there is so much richness in this on this planet. Whether it's food, whether it's, you know, energy, whether it's people's love and compassion, whatever it is, there's an abundance of it.
There's a gate, just come on.
It's just how do we share it equally in a way that everyone can get access to it, as opposed to hoarding it. So this is the basis of permaculture.
No, very close.
Transition, and what people were pretty much doing is most people who were practicing permaculture were doing it in farms far away from society, you know, escaping, getting away, and doing it in really rural places. And so you had the same old beardy weirdies who were doing permaculture, and at that point there were still more people living in urban environment, in rural conditions than urban, but they saw the number of people living in urban environments was increasing, and now there are more people across the globe who live in an urban environment compared to rural. So if we do not address urban issues, we're missing more than half the world's population, and actually they are more culpable for the problems that we are creating in the world than people who are living in rural. So so one particular permaculture teacher was doing a year-long course in Ireland, in the Emerald Isles, and as a result of the design that they were making, they started to look at how is it that we could bring permaculture into urban environments. And so they centered around this idea, this concept of, you know, fossil fuels and, you know, peak oil, so the amount of oil that is being dug up, and compared to how much is being utilised, so the amount that's being utilised compared to how much is being able to harvest from the earth, as they start diverging, this is called peak oil. So in other words, now you're taking from, you're consuming more than you can take. And some say that point passed 10 years ago, some say it might not happen for another 100 years, all the scientists have different. For me, it doesn't matter. The fact is, at some point, it will kick in, and we can see already how the price of oil is affecting all of us. Anyone who's reliant on the system to feed us, to house us, to heat us, if we think about all the different things we use fossil fuels for. If the price goes up, if there's a shortage and the price goes up, it affects everybody and everything. And so, so Transition Town was born as a result to try and see how is it that we can transition people away from being fossil fuel dependent, but to do it as communities, to do it together with other people. And so for me, it's a really beautiful concept, a really beautiful idea. And so as such, when we start a transition town, and I've started maybe about 15, 20 around the world, what we typically do is we invite, we give some people some background into how to understand some of the world's problems, and then ask them, well, what are you passionate to look at? I don't care what you think someone else should do. What is it you are willing to do? So maybe some people are, well, I'm really passionate about growing food. All right, so who else is into growing food? All right, you go, have a chat about how you're going to grow food in an environmentally friendly way. Other people, energy, electricity. All right, who else? Off you go. And so in this way, transportation, energy, housing, heating, cooling, livelihoods, how to create a livelihood, how to have economies that are actually enriching the world rather than depleting and separating. So people look at whichever area they're passionate about. So you'll find every single transition town is different around the globe. And so my role so I'm part of the London Transition Town Hub, which is where we met. And so we organise regular meetups for that. But I've also been elected to represent the London hub at the international level. And so there's hubs all over the world. And so I meet them, and they elected me to be the person who connects all of the hubs. So I run regular monthly meetings all across the globe, for people all across the globe, to talk about transition issues and come together and share beautiful ideas. So I have a good understanding of what's happening in Transition Town across the world, and people face similar patterns, similar challenges, and there are similar solutions. So the idea is, by connecting each other, we can help each other. So that's my background. So I can talk about permaculture, I can talk about food growing. Within permaculture, I guess some of the key things I specialise in is really low maintenance food growing, but in a way that is really biodiverse rich, because what we see with a lot of food growing strategies is it's very, very, very human centric. It's all about humans taking as much as we can, as much as we want, as we can, but completely at the expense of nature. And we can see the biodiversity loss is staggering. Just 10, 20 key species go extinct, the world's in trouble. What they're saying, the predictions are, in the next 50 years, between 500,000 to 1 million species of animals, insects and plants are going to go extinct because of our human actions. And food growing, the conventional, even organic food growing, is part of that problem. and this mentality that no, we should grow our food and not share any of it with nature. So caging, you know, fruits so that birds can't eat it, you know, and all these kind of practices really prevent nature from really thriving. And so this is one of the things probably I'm most passionate about. But then I'm also into wow, where to even begin? So energy